Welcome to episode 2 of this podcast. And right now, this podcast has no name, but it soon will. I just didn't want to have a name stop me from actually just starting this podcast. So that's why I'm just kind of doing this without any name. But in this podcast, it's based off of stories of inspiration, businesses, and some of the lessons that come with that. And this time, we're going to take the podcast to pastries. We're going to be talking stories to a person who makes just these delicious, finely balanced pastries, who's been in business for 17 years. She's been featured in different magazines, had experience on TV. And we're going to be talking stories with Maria Short of Short and Sweet Bakery and Cafe in Hilo. So Maria, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Jase.
First, tell us currently about Short and Sweet. Where is it located and what is your bakery about?
Short and Sweet is located at 374 Kinooli Street in downtown Hilo. We are going on our 17th year of business. We've been at this location for 12 years, I guess. We were at our first location for 5 years in Javi, and we moved to Hilo. We're a bakery cafe. We do high-end wedding cakes. We do paninis and sweetbread and bagels. We have a full-on bakery. We also do marshmallows. We kind of just do a lot of different things, but one of the things that we are known for is our tagline is handcrafted, heart-inspired. So most of everything we do is all very labor-intensive and all done by hand.
Your name is Maria Short, right? So that probably had something to do with the name itself.
Yes, my husband came up with a name. It's always so hard to come up with a name for a business, right? You just think of, what's going to work? And then he said, what about Short and Sweet? It has our name in it. And I was like, that's it. That's perfect. So his joke is, and he's been saying the same joke now for 17 years, is that I'm the short one and he's the sweet one. Because he's 6 foot tall and I'm 5 foot tall.
He's a tall guy.
He's a tall guy. So he always says, I'm the sweet one, she's the short one.
Where did it begin? Where did you start off? Because as your love for culinary and pastries and all of this, there has to be a time back in the day, maybe when you were growing up, was there ever a time that made you say, hey, I really wanted to get into baking?
Oh, yeah, I can pinpoint it exactly. When you ask me, I go right back to that memory. I had an aunt that used to collect those Wilton yearbooks. Now, if anybody's ever knows anything about baking, Wilton was the only company really back in the day that was doing any kind of real cake decorating at all. And she had these yearbooks and I just fell in love. And I had to have been, I want to say 4 or 5 years old. That's what I want to do. And, I also wanted to be a geologist and a ballet dancer. So, but when I was 8, I was in 3rd grade. My 3rd grade teacher was leaving the school and she told us that we could pick any book out of her little shelf library to take with us. And I picked out this cookbook that was called The Cookie of the Month. And it was a cookbook. It was hand illustrated. It was 12 recipes. And it was written for children. And I was like, I love that book. I took it home and I said, I want to make every cookie in this book. And that's how it started. I had asked my mom, she asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I was 13. I said, I want the joy of cooking. And she said, are you sure? Really? You don't want jeans or some makeup? I said, no, I want the joy of cooking. So it started really early.
At that age, you probably think you'd want something else. As a book that's just a little bit more mature and just something that's a little bit more sophisticated, it's amazing that you'd ask for something like that.
Well, I loved it because it was so thorough. Joy of Cooking explained everything. So I made croissants from that book. I was making croissants when I was 13. I read pounds instead of cups. So when I opened up the oven, the croissants were floating in butter. But they were yummy. I got the lamination down, but they were floating in butter. But yeah, what 13-year-old attempts croissants, right? From scratch. And my parents are immigrants, right? They're from the Philippines. So this is all new to them. And in the Philippines, most households don't have an oven. There isn't a real strong in-home baking because it's very, very hot there. And nobody wants to actually heat up their home with an oven. So most baked goods are produced in a bakery. If you needed a cake or you wanted baked goods, you would go to a bakery for your breads or your desserts. You didn't necessarily make them at home. So my parents just were like, where is this coming from? Like, we have no idea.
So that's another question that I was kind of wondering, like if there was any type of recipes in your household that was passed down in generations and passed on to you, or is it just kind of you had to learn a different type of cooking?
Nope, there were none. I am the very first baker of my house. And I'll be honest, I probably will be one of the only ones. Like, none of my children want to have anything to do with this. Like, I have some that are like, they love to cook, but they don't like to bake at all. And I have, between Dean, my husband and I, we have 6, and not a single one had to have anything to do with baking. My dad was a phenomenal cook, but there was no tradition for baking at all. So they didn't really understand. And when I got into this is before Martha Stewart, before Food Network. This was way, 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 way before that. So when I told them I wanted to be a chef, they just laughed. They thought that was silly. My dad was actually in the restaurant business. He was a general manager for a lot of different restaurants. Back then, the industry wasn't the same. So they just said, no, you're not going to culinary school. That's silly.
Is it because he faced a lot of challenges inside just working with food and he didn't want you to go through the same things?
Definitely. I see that now. He wanted a different life for me. He didn't want me to end up being a line cook or, a sous chef. He wanted something, a lawyer, doctor, or architect, engineer, those kind of things. I mean, my parents were Filipino immigrants. That's what as a first generation Filipino, that's what you did. You went to college and you did that. I said, no, I don't want to do that.
As you got more into college and all of that after high school, you must have kept the love for baking and cooking, because I know from the website, it says that you went to Baltimore International Culinary College. What was that like?
I only went to BIC for a little while. That was for me to explore whether or not I actually wanted to pursue culinary. And so I did a whole bunch of life before I was able to really decide this is where I want to go with my life. Got married, I had kids, I got divorced, and then I was like, life is short, and this is something that I need to explore. So I went to BIC for just a couple months just to see whether or not I really wanted, and to see whether or not I could really hack it, whether or not I had any talent. My instructor there said, yes, you should go. So I ended up going to l'Académie de Cuisine, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. It's now no longer in existence, but it was a fantastic culinary school. A lot of graduates from that school ended up on Food Network and Bon Appetit and Epicurious and Eater and Lucky Peach. Like, there's a lot of us out there. So I went to l'Académie de Cuisine, and then I worked several different areas. I worked for a caterer. I worked as a pastry chef instructor for Merchant Marines.
What is a pastry chef for Merchant Marines? Like, what do you mean by you taught Merchant Marines?
Merchant Marines have to do continuing education for their Coast Guard certification. Like, there's a whole bunch of safety things they have to know how to do. They have a school in Southern Maryland called Piney Point, or Seafarer, Harry Lundenberg Seafarers School of Seamanship is what it's called. All of the Merchant Marines have to cycle through this school. What they did was they set up a kitchen or a hotel that the kitchen of it is also a teaching place. It's a lab. They were constantly, so after so many months at sea, they would get off and then they would have to come to school. And that's where I met my husband, who is from Hawaii.
That's why he's such a good cook.
It was really cool. It was such an amazing experience to teach. I love teaching. And Merchant Marines, they come from all over the world. So a lot of them aren't even fluent in English. So you really have to be creative how you're going to get information across.
And then just different ways of teaching them too, right? Because you have to have that communication.
Yes.
And I know after that, you actually became like a chef at Kukio, right?
Yes. So my first job on the Big Island was pastry chef for Kukio.
I know that's kind of like the more high-end housing and owners and all of that. So what was that experience like when you were a pastry chef at Kukio?
My time at Kukio was a singular experience. I will probably never, ever experience anything like that. I mean, we got yelled at if our food costs went below 55%. I mean, it was just anything I wanted, whenever I wanted. Homeowners for Kukio, a lot of them had private jets. They could be anywhere in the world. They had several homes everywhere all over the world. So it was explained to me that basically when the homeowners come to their homes at Kukio, that they didn't want to leave the property. As a restaurant, could not have the same menu every time they came to eat at the restaurant. So we changed our menu every single week. That was a challenge because this was before cell phones. This was before, well, we was right at the beginning of cell phones, but they weren't nearly as powerful. So like I have hundreds and hundreds of books because I was constantly doing research. Every single week I had to have 3 or 4 different desserts, 3 or 4 different what they call like friandises or miandis. I had to have a couple different intermezzos. We changed our menu every single week so that they didn't have to leave the property to go eat differently.
Wow, that's kind of like boot camp for like being a chef, right? Because at that time when there's not really a lot of ways you can find information, like the internet, like how easy it is for us to pull up information now, you'd really have to look up pages and pages of cookbooks just to get ideas for these different recipes. Then you have to actually put your own spin on them too a lot of times, right?
It was really, really fun a lot of times. Stressful, but fun because I'll never be anywhere where anything I want I could get. Like it didn't matter. We used the best chocolate. We used the best butter. If I wanted huckleberries in the middle of the winter, they would fly me a gallon of huckleberries in the middle of the winter. It was crazy how much creative freedom I had with no limit to what it cost. Those two variables together helped me to grow. It was an amazing experience.
And what do you mean by used to get yelled at a lot over there? I know you're talking about that.
I mean, not yelled at. I mean, it was a typical kitchen. It was just, there's a chef, there's one executive chef, and it's his opinion and his way. And I'll be honest, if it weren't for that chef, I probably would not have opened Short and Sweet. So I owe him a lot. I mean, it was my desire to have a lot more autonomy over what I make and how I make it and over my life. My youngest 2 were fairly small, and I didn't want to have to keep asking someone else if I could spend time with them. I wanted that to be my own decision. Again, I was the only female chef, in the kitchen. But because of that, a lot of times there's not the same understanding for that work-life balance that as a woman I wanted, I needed. I told my colleagues, I said, you only get 1 2-year-old Christmas in your life. That's it. And when you miss it, you don't get to do it again.
And that is definitely true because you only have like 1 2-year-old birthday, 1 2-year-old Christmas, and 1 3-year-old birthday, 1 3-year-old Christmas with your child, and you don't want to miss that. Now let's talk about Short and Sweet. This Hilo location that you have now, it's not the first location. So you said it got started there in Hawi, in Kohala.
So my husband is from the Big Island and I'm from the East Coast. I was born in Massachusetts, raised in Maryland, went to culinary school in Maryland. My first husband was a Naval Academy graduate. He was a naval officer. So we did some traveling. Like I've lived in Florida and San Diego. I lived in the Philippines for a little while, but I'd never been to Hawaii. My husband is definitely a Big Island boy. He is totally a Big Island boy. I knew that his heart was still here. And especially after I had the children, after we had our boys, we were just like, I'm like, I want to move. And he's like, there is no way I am bringing you to the Big Island unless we visit first. And of course, visiting was always so hard. It was either we had enough time, but not enough money, or we had enough money, but not enough time. So we finally were able to visit. And we spent 3 weeks in a rental car. We stayed with some family. We stayed some friends. We camped. We put 3,000 miles on the rental car. He wanted to show me every nook and cranny of the Big Island to make sure. And we were done in February, and we sold our house in May. And we moved in June. On one of those trips, we drove through Hawi, and there was this little bakery there, and it was called the Hawi Bakery, and it had just opened. And it was so cute inside. And we were looking through the window, and we were like, God, it would be so cool to have a place like this. And we loved Hawi. Well, guess what? 3 years later, that's the bakery we bought.
How was it living in Hawi? It's, Kohala is such a quiet and small town. Coming from the mainland, it must have been such a change for you.
I mean, I had spent 2 years in Waimea because I worked at Kukio first. And when we worked at Kukio first, I was living in Waimea. And that actually was perfect because I was coming from Bellingham, Washington. And Waimea was cool. And it was, it was it was the perfect segue to Hawi. I loved Hawi. it was a really wonderful place to raise children. You know, it was very safe, but it was very, as far as from a business aspect, it was very seasonal. And that was really, really hard. So when it was good, it was great. But when it was not, it was so hard.
How long were you in Hawi?
5 years.
What were the seasons that were really difficult in Hawi? Like you said, it goes by seasons, like business there. But what were those seasons that were really difficult?
Definitely September through Christmas, the fall. Those 4 months are really hard. It's because everyone is busy with school and going back to school, and nobody's traveling, right? They're not actually necessarily coming to visit Hawaii. And so it's super quiet. It was really hard. And Hawi is not it was very small, very local. There wasn't a lot to draw from. We needed a bigger population base. So when our landlord didn't renew our lease, and we were like, okay, we could go anywhere. But one of the things that we decided was that we wanted to serve local community, and we wanted a more stable base. So a lot of people ask us, why didn't we go to Waimea? Why didn't we go to Kona? Kona would have been better all the time. And I'm like, no, because I probably would have done really well in Kona and Waimea, but I wanted a really solid local base. And that's what we got with Hilo. The community here is amazing. And the fact that I wanted the boys to be in a educational system that was just a little bit, public school wise was I thought a little bit better. They both graduated Waikea a couple years ago, and it's been great. They're both in college, and we're empty nesters now. I think we made the right choice.
Who was your mentors and who inspired you as you were learning culinary, like when you were going to college, and then also when you had your first bakery and all of that? Who was like some mentors of yours, or even people that you look up to that were like some celebrity chefs?
Like, I guess Bronwyn Weber, which like most people won't even know, but she's a Food Network, like fantastic cake decorator. And then here on the island, and she recently left, which is really makes me sad, but Jean Hull. So when I first came to this island, the executive chef at Kukio said to me, all right, there's this woman who knows all things culinary in the Big Island. Her name is Jean Hull. I don't know how to get in touch with her, but if you can find her number, you should talk to her because she knows all things culinary on this island. And boy, was he right. To be honest, Jean Hull was the one that got me into this space. When we were looking for a new space, I called her, and she was the one that introduced me to the landlord of the space.
So it was just a cold call then. You just have to build courage, give her a call, and you guys connected.
I saw her name and number on a poster. I had just gotten that number I think I had my interview like a couple days before. So I thought, you know what? This is kismet or serendipity or the universe telling me call. So yeah, I just caught something I would never do right before. But I thought, you know what have I got to lose? And let me tell you, that was the beginning of like the most amazing relationship. Whenever I needed help for anything, she was always there. Always.
So I know Robert's Bakery too, this building itself, it's so historic over the years. Growing up as a child, I used to be brought here by my mom, my grandmother, and we used to buy a lot of pastries, eclairs, and all these other things. So such an iconic location. Before you actually decided to rent the space, did you know about all that history of Robert's Bakery?
Yes. Actually, because my husband also lived in Hilo for a little while when he was younger. Yeah. It was a lot to live up to be honest. And we still get people today. They're like, oh, when I came to Robert's, my favorite was the custard cake or the Long Johns or whatever. So we have a relationship with the actual Tyras. Like, they come to visit us at least once a year. And they sent us photos from the grand opening. And so, yeah, I talk to Mark and them, at least once a year. They reach out and say, how you guys doing? They send people, they like to send their management staff to come look at the building to see where it all started. But it was kind of important to me that we do our own thing. Like, I would never, ever want to dishonor that. I think it's really cool that the building has always been a bakery. I think it's very important that it stays a bakery.
You didn't feel that pressure to really have to live up to something just because it's such an iconic location then at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to do my own thing. I'll be honest, when we first got to Hilo, we were told by someone that we wouldn't last, which I think is funny because we're on our 17th year, right? But he basically said that you don't serve donuts and you are casting pearls before the swine, which was so rude. But it just made me even more determined, right? It just said, no, there's a spot for us in Hilo. I'm very committed to this community and I am very grateful, so grateful for the support that the community has shown us.
So, inside that building too, it's a historic building. Is there like things from the past location that's still there?
Oh, totally. The floors are original, the walls are original. We still have the ovens, the lights are all original. We actually have sheet pans that are stamped RT, Robert Tyra. I mean, they're his original sheet pans. They're stamped on the back. Yeah, it was really cool because the first time Mark and Curtis Tyra came to visit, they came in and they just were looking around and they said, "Wow, it's amazing how much of it is still the same."
And it goes to show you that those type of pans and things are such good quality that they last for years, decades, right?
Yes, yes, yes. We're still using them. They're still working. Everybody's good.
When you first opened Short and Sweet, did you face any challenges? And what kind of challenges do you face today with the restaurant itself?
Everything. Every single thing from lack of funds to support, like, we're trying to raise a family and do a business. It's really, really hard. There are lots of challenges. Navigating the system, getting your, all your permits and all your everything is right. And then making sure that all of you're in compliance with everything. I mean, it's a big learning curve. And I used to say this all the time and I stopped saying it, thank goodness. But I used to tell people, oh, I'm not a business person. I'm a pastry chef or, but you won't survive doing it that way. So I've had to really if you look at my reading on my Audible list, it's like all these business books, just trying to because it's really difficult, especially in these times, to keep finding the wherewithal to keep going because it isn't easy. It's not for everyone.
For the bakery right now, what type of locally sourced ingredients do you use?
Well, we try to always use local. It's kind of hard, but I mean, of course, everything from our cafe, we source our lettuce from a local farmer. We source all of our vegetables from the farmer's market. We get our bananas from a local banana farmer. We try always to get local. And then, of course, we have our other company, which is what's in the back half of Short and Sweet, which is Kipuka Mills. And that is our agricultural processing company. And we are making macadamia nut flour and Okinawa sweet potato flour and mac nut oil and something that is patent pending, macadamia nut marzipan, which I am patented as Macapan. How Kipuka Mills started was a long time ago. Our friend, he passed away, but he was making mac nut oil. He was pressing it. And he came to me with what was left over from the pressing, which they call cake or meal. And he said, do you have any use for this? Because I'm just like throwing it out or, giving it to the pigs or whatever. I gasped. I was like, what? I said, that's mac nuts. No, I said, give me that. And that's how I came up with Macapan. And the brainstorming with my husband to be able to scale it up so that we can actually provide the flour as not just as a retail product, but as a food service product. So, so now we are pressing our own nuts and milling our own flour. I'm really excited with this new venture. We have been using it in the shop, but we're using it more. And there are local outlets that are carrying it now. The Locavore Store and Island Naturals, Farm Link on Oahu.
Short and Sweet itself was featured in a lot of magazines throughout the years. I know you had your cakes featured. So what magazines were you featured in, and which of those features are you most proud of?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so Short and Sweet's been featured in Grace Ormond, Wedding Style. We've been in Brides Magazine, America's Most Beautiful Cakes, in Hanaho a couple times. There's the TV appearances, multiple ones in Japan. I don't even know how to pronounce those shows. And then Travel Channel for the sweetbread, and of course Food Network Holiday Baking Championship. And then we've done little things like Animal Planet. We've done stuff with Animal Planet. They came and used our kitchen.
What do you mean, Animal Planet? How does that deal with food and?
A couple years ago, when the lava was erupting, there was a show called Amanda rescues or something, rescue animals. Anyways, she went and would rescue animals. So she came to the Big Island to rescue dogs. And they wanted to feed as well. They wanted to feed Pahoa. So they used our kitchen to cook everything. They brought a chef along. That's what it was. They brought a chef along that was going to cook a meal for the relief center down in Pahoa and the hub, I think it was. And then they used our kitchen. So they would come back periodically and check in and say, hey,
You said Travel Channel also, you were on that show, right? But tell us about that other feature they did about the sweetbread.
That one was Delicious Destinations with Andrew Zimmern. And they did a whole thing on the Big Island, actually. So it's funny because they featured us, Seaside, Kuhio Grill, and then the other one was a Huli Huli chicken place in Kona. And the owner happens to be one of Ian's best friends from childhood. So that was really cool. But they featured our sweetbread, and that was with my husband, Dean.
Tell us about that sweetbread. I mean, it has to be amazing if they featured it, right?
I think it's the best sweetbread. I know I'm biased. But so my husband graduated from Kona Waina High School on the Big Island. And there used to be a bakery right by the high school called Chris's Bakery. And that's what he based his sweetbread. Now, we were really, really careful because this is where King's Hawaiian Sweetbread was born. So it's a different sweetbread. It's his recipe. He came up with it. He tweaked it and tweaked it and tweaked it. It is extremely labor intensive.
Like, what do you mean labor intensive to make that sweetbread?
Well, so when we do it, it's just all hand rolled and formed. And it's a very sticky dough. So it takes, you have to hand roll it. A lot of places that do those kind of yeasted doughs are able to use machinery. And that's how they're able to pump out more. But we can't with this dough. We only make so much, and when we sell out, we sell out.
And then I want to talk about, speaking of the TV stuff, I want to talk about the Holiday Baking Championship experience. I know we kind of talked about that before, and the stuff you see on TV and behind the scenes, it's a lot different. It's a lot more intensive behind the scenes, right? When you're telling me about this experience that you had. What was the show about, first off?
It's 10 bakers that go through different challenges. They have a preheat and then a main heat, and they get eliminated after the main heat. It's all Christmas or holiday themed challenges. Yeah, Holiday Baking Championship was definitely a highlight of my career, one of my highlights. It was amazing. It was extremely stressful. And I would definitely do things a little differently next time. I loved who I met. We're still friends. We're still talking.
And then you said behind the scenes, it was like a lot of late hours you were recording that, right? I mean...
Oh, it's just crazy. For 1 minute or 2 minutes of talking, it's 6 hours of taping. So you're just there for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. So they have a lounge set up and you do the challenge and then you all go back up and you wait because there's 10 of you. And each person they have to do this with each person. So they would have trailers set up, and it's very, it's a lot more than just the baking. And that's what I would do differently. One of the things I definitely would do is I would work out more before I would, because it is so physically demanding, and your endurance, it has to be at a certain level. You can't just sleep your way through it or laze around. It's very demanding physically.
How many days were you recording there, and then what was the schedule like?
Our wake-up calls were anywhere from 6 to 7, and then we would get shuttled to the studio, and then we could be there from anywhere from 8 to 12 hours every day. The longer you're on, the more and more tired you are because you're just not catching up, right? You're so exhausted. You're just so very tired.
What did you learn from all of that, that experience?
Oh, I learned that I need to relax. I was so stressed out about the whole thing all the time. And honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal. I just needed to just relax and enjoy the experience as much as possible. I think in one of the episodes, they even caught me. They filmed me where I'm telling myself, I'm having fun. I'm having fun. I'm having fun. Because I would call Dean afterwards and he'd be like, baby, you just got to relax. He's like, that doesn't make for good filming either. So yeah, I would definitely relax. I would be way more just in the moment and enjoying it and not worrying so much about how I look or what people are going to say or any of that.
Other than baking, what is some of your passions? I know you're in the bakery all the time, there got to be something else that you like to do for fun, right?
Oh yeah. One of the number one things I like to do is swim. If I'm in Hilo and I can swim, then I'm at Richardson's. That's my favorite spot to swim. Used to be Champagne Ponds, but oh well. But I love swimming. I really, really do. I don't get to do it enough at all. And then I love to read. I love reading. And I like doing a lot of things. I do calligraphy. I play the piano. Piano I love to play, and I've been playing a lot more. It helps my stress. Because when I'm playing, I'm not thinking about the bakery. Like, I have to concentrate on the notes. So that really helps. Oh, and I do have my 2 Kuni pigs, which I love them dearly. We just got them, Charlotte and Wilbur.
Those actually make good house pets too, right?
But a Kuni pig, they're from New Zealand, and they're actually grazers. They eat grass. They're amazing. They are so smart, and they are so cute. One of the things I love about them is they really don't smell. Like, I will go out there and I will pet them and rub them, and they love belly rubs and ears. I can smell my hand afterwards. There is absolutely no scent, none. Like, I'm very picky about that, right? Being in the food service. Yeah, Dean's going to make me a harness, and I'm going to be able to walk them. So we are empty nesters, right? So I like to say that we place the kids with something that eats less and is less stinky.
Oh my goodness! And that they're named after like Charlotte's Web, right? Classic children's book. What really inspires you to wake up every day and keep on doing this?
My employees, they inspire me. My employees really, it's like at the end of the day, that's who I'm doing it for. The employees and the community. The food industry has gotten a lot of bad rap for the low pay and the no benefits and just, how hard it is, right? So when my husband and I started 17 years ago, we made a commitment to each other and to Short and Sweet that this kitchen and this place would never be like the kitchens that we had worked in. There would be no yelling. There's no ego. We are all together in this, and that it would be more of a community ohana base, not that hierarchy that you see like on Gordon Ramsay's show or whatever. It's not like that here. My absolute goal is to get a living wage for everybody here. I'm trying to drum up business and trying to do, increase revenue and increase my profit margin, all that stuff. The goal is always so that I can give people raises, so that I can give them better health benefits, so that I can give them a paid vacation. Because not only do they need that, Hilo needs that. Hilo needs a base of good jobs. And I want to be one of the businesses that provides that.
What is one piece of advice you'd tell yourself when you first started, now that you're here in 2022?
Especially this last couple of years, I've really evolved in a different way. Like, I used to think it was all about being chef-driven and about the, like recipes and food and all that. But there's a whole nother component that I was not at all focusing on. And it was to the detriment of Short and Sweet, which is the business side of it. I always thought of it negatively. And now it's a completely different perspective for me, because you have to have that. It's like a muscle, right? If that muscle is not strong, the Short and Sweet won't survive. And it doesn't matter if you have the best tasting and best looking macarons or cakes. If business-wise you are making bad decisions, then you are not going to survive. You will not be able to make those cakes survive. So I would just tell myself to keep pushing, keep focusing, but also relax. It's going to work out.
Thank you very much to Maria of Short and Sweet for being on the podcast, kind of telling her story, and what an interesting story it is. Just got a little update. I got a chance to talk stories with Maria earlier today again, and she was telling me how she just teamed up with the Hawaii Community College culinary program that they have there. So those that are interested in being a pastry chef, they can actually go and intern at her restaurant. So they get hands-on experience making all different kinds of pastries, and they get to help out there. They get to learn from her. So that's awesome that she's helping out this program, and she's passing on the knowledge to some future pastry chefs, kind of like what she had to experience as she was getting into this line of work. So right on, Maria. And we look forward to just some of the amazing things you have planned this coming year. I gotta say a huge thank you to Justin Duty, who helps me edit some of this audio here, just makes it sound a little bit better. So thank you for his audio expertise, and hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll have more stories coming up soon on this podcast with no name.